I'm gonna go on an ocean journey. Yeah, I can anyways due to medical. Yeah, and honestly, even if I weren't being yeeted for being transgender, the second I told my main, like, I have two therapists. I have the one that my government insurance pays for and all that shit. Well, they're coming, buddy. They're coming. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like I would get yeeted for being like I have two separate therapists, right? I have one that the military insurance covers and another that I pay for out of pocket. The reason I have an out of pocket is because the military therapist does not deal with trauma work directly. All right, they'll deal with like PTSD as a result of combat and shit, but they will not deal with trauma from your childhood. Not really. So I ended up going to another provider out of the military network. How do you call it? And that provider I'm doing EMDR with. Now, there had been suspicions on the part of my military therapist and also so basically, while I was in military therapy, I was there for a few different reasons. For one, when trans people were allowed, having a behavioral health was required to transition. In other words, they had to keep an eye on you and make sure that you were of sound mind and body to transition. Their job was to make sure that you truly wanted to, and also to keep an eye on you as you do it. So there's a whole last process to transition to the military. A part of that was to have regular behavioral health appointments. That was required by regulation for transgender individuals in the military. So I had a therapist for that at first. Then some stuff came up and my anxiety really started peaking. The military made my anxiety worse. So then I started going to the therapist for anxiety. I've had a few different iterations of therapy. But finally, as the anxiety got a little more managed, I was left with this issue with dissociation, right? My military therapist had no issue talking about dissociation as a symptom, but he would not put the name DID on the case. And he even wrote in his, notes, we must be very careful before, following this path, because this path of, DID/dissociation is something that is singularly incompatible with military service, with active duty service. So he was dancing around that issue. Let's see if there's anything interesting in this ravine here. He was very much dancing around the possibility of DID. So he wasn't really touching that with a 10-foot pole. He sent me towards some DID resources and such to, peer support groups type of deal. And he suggested that I do independent trauma work, but that it was outside of his range as a military professional. So that's how I ended up looking for an out-of-network therapist. I found one, and we started doing something called EMDR, which is a way to try and overcome and deal with trauma. I found an EMDR therapist who also has experience with dissociation. It was a few sessions in. She didn't immediately jump towards diagnosis and shit. She was very much thinking in terms of, let's deal with the trauma. But eventually, after multiple sessions, she was finally I was expressing how I was having some struggles with therapy, with the EMDR, and how I was feeling like my head get fucking crazy and feel weird. And it was that point she was finally okay, look, that's because of the DID. You have DID, and that's causing issues with the EMDR. So it is that point, literally 2 weeks ago at this point, that I finally had a diagnosis made by a non-military therapist. But in short, unless I report it to my main therapist, it's not going to be on my record. And if it were on my record, that is something that would change the mechanism of my discharge. Rather than being an admin discharge for gender dysphoria, it would become a admin discharge for mood disorder or whatever the fuck they call it. A different characterization. And then I lose my clearance. Which, to be fair, I understand why they wouldn't want people with DID to have a fucking clearance, but that's mostly the stigma. It's not actually like movies and shit. It's honestly much more of a problem for the person who has it than anyone else.